Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be going over a tier list for the Surging Sparks format for upcoming regionals such as Birmingham and Rio de Janeiro. Our Surging Sparks format is almost coming to an end, but there have been some shifts in the metagame, such as the Champions League Osaka, heavily featuring cards that aren't from Prismatic Evolutions. That means that our metagame is shifted to include decks like Archaladon, Ancient Box is seeing a rise, and more. So give this video a like, share, subscribe, let me know whatever you want in the comments. Be like, I'm right, I'm wrong, I'm first, anything like that. It does help boost the YouTube algorithm. And again, this is going to largely be based off of my opinion on how the decks are going into the current metagame. We'll have to see how that overall gets placed here when it comes down to it. Like, it's not always going to be perfect. Sometimes it's a combination of results, or sometimes it's a combination, like it's an art and a science. So we're gonna try our best, but I'd love to hear some feedback. I think I have everything in alphabetical order or close to alphabetical order. So we're gonna start off with Ancient Box. Now, Ancient Box is a deck that I really like when it comes down to it. So I played this at Toronto, and when it comes down to like placing this deck, I think it's like tier, like it's not S tier. S tier would be reserved for like the best deck or the best decks. It's not tier 1 because it's not necessarily there. Like, I think it's like 1.5 or 2 when it comes down to it. And I think I'm gonna put it at 1.5. I'm trying to think of like how I want to do it, like 2, 4. Yeah, I think I'm gonna probably put her in the 1.5 territory today. And the reason why is because I think Ancient Box is pretty well positioned in our current metagame. It might not necessarily have the best Charizard matchup, but it can hold its own against a lot of the metagame. So we're gonna go with Ancient Box at 1.5. I do have lists available for a lot of these decks available in our previous videos, top 10 videos. Covered most of these decks in pure video form, so we'll see how it goes. And if I end up hating on your deck, I'm sorry. Sometimes I hate on the decks that I like too, so we'll keep it real. Gardevoir to me is I want to put it almost at like it's S or 1, and it's just because it's seen so much success in the metagame, and it's like it struggles a little bit against Regidrago, but it really like holds its own compared to other decks. So I think like what we're gonna do is we're gonna put Gardevoir as S. Any decks in, it's just gonna be the order that I pick them, in which they're like first. So if Gardevoir's first and Regidrago second, there's nothing there. Gardevoir is just one of the best decks in formats, and it holds its own against the metagame. Top players are often seeing success with it, and that's really where it's going to be. I fully expected a deck that you're going to run into when it comes to your upcoming regionals, League Cups, whatever, and it's arguably one of the most successful decks in our format. Charizard, if I gave it to Gardevoir, I have to give it to Charizard as well. Charizard is seeing some of the most success out of any deck right now, especially with a lot of decks like Ancient Box and everything else kind of rolling out there. I think it can see the success that we want to see. So I think like if you're choosing between any of the decks in S tier, just choose them. And I'd really like pick any decks between S1 and 1.5. When we get down to the bottom half of the tier list, that's where you really want to be like, hey, I've been playing this deck forever, or I'm playing it because I think the metagame shifted like this. But those are really the decks that haven't seen as much success. Dragapult with Dust Noir is a deck that has not seen nearly as much success in this format. It will see success in our Prismatic Evolutions format. So I think what I'm going to do is put this at 2.5 right now. It's an existing deck. It is seeing some success, but it isn't necessarily where we want it to be in the current metagame. I think like it holds its own, but it's not the best. We have Dragapult with Iron Thorns. I think that this is one of those decks that's just like moderately placed in the formats. Certainly like Iron Thorns can hold on to itself, can see success. Dragapult can also see success in its own rights. So based off the metagame, I think it's like 2, it might be 1.5, close between those two, but I think I'm going to try to differentiate wherever I feel like I'm going to trust my gut on this one. Gouging Fire is a deck that I feel like never gets the respect it deserves. I'm probably going to put Gouging Fire at 2. And the reason why I'm putting it 2 and not like 3 based off the play that it's received, I just think it's really good outside of a Charizard matchup right now. So if we're looking towards a lot of these decks, Gouging Fire seems really well positioned compared to how it has been in previous tournaments. Goldango is probably going to be... It's probably going to be like 1.5 as well. Like right beside the Ancient Box. I think it can hold its own when it comes down to this metagame, but I do have it, like, I do have my own like reservations about the deck. Like, I think it struggles to some decks at the top. I think it's really like coin flip reliant, or how your opponent does in a lot of cases, but like it's seeing success. It's probably in the 1.5 territory. Like, I think it's definitely there. I almost need a 1.75 territory. Iron Thorns, I'm going to put at tier 2. I think it holds its own when it comes down to the metagame. Not enough people are really playing it. I think it's there with Dragapult, Iron Thorns, in that kind of category where, like, these are the decks that I think are going to be great to make top 128 at regionals, top 256, maybe making those day 2s. I don't think they really get too much further than that. Ancient Box and Goldango are just like slightly above that due to previous successes that they might have seen, or based off of recent metagame shifts. Lost Zone is probably going to be 2.5, just not really like well positioned in our current metagame. Regidrago's kind of ruling it all right now. And I mean, I don't know how I feel about the Charizard, Gardevoir, Regidrago matchups. Everything else is like okay. So like if you're a strong Lost Zone box pilot, go for it. But other than that, it's just really like kind of cutting it up past that line of like where you need to really come up with reasons to play the deck. Lugia, I'm gonna put at I'm probably gonna put at tier 1. Lugia is probably one of the most underrated decks heading into Birmingham. And any of these upcoming regionals like Rio, San Antonio. So I'm going to put Lugia there for right now. I really want to see and like revisit this after the regionals and see exactly what happened there. So we'll have to see what happens to see like if Lugia popped off or not, because this is where the metagame's always changing. Like, and I think the tier list does a better job than my top 10 best decks to kind of break down the decks instead of just ranking them, because people are like, hey, what about this deck? And if there's any decks that you think I missed on the tier list, I hope that you all are enjoying my little icons that I created. I spent way more time on that than I thought I would. But if you're looking for your deck on there and want to know how it's placed, let me know in the comments below. Totally will add it, as long as it's one of the more reasonable decks. I covered within like the top 50 or so decks. So if you're like, hey, what about my homebrew deck, like, but like maybe if you're like, hey, I want to know how Conkeldurr plays, I'll tell you. And if it's not on here, it might be placing in the tier 3 for what it's worth. But if there's a deck that you think that I miss, let me know, or maybe a variation of a deck that I missed, let me know. Palkia Dusknoir is going to just be tier 2.5. I don't think any deck like is straight up tier 3 right now. Well, that could be wrong, but right now I don't think Palkia is tier 3. I think it's just like not really well positioned in our current metagame, kind of falling out of favor a little bit. Maybe things can change, but right now it's going to just be tier 2.5. I can't necessarily put my stamp of approval on the deck. There's too many like lightning type decks that might pop up, or there's too many like aggressive decks that could just rip your Palkia in shreds. It kind of started falling after like when Jeremy Camillo won the Buenos Aires special event. So he got in, got his win, and then the deck really fell flat after that, which is sad to see. We're going to go Pidgeot Control. Pidgeot Control, well, it's probably not making our top 10 this week in decks just because of play. I'm probably going to put it at tier 1. I think it's just really one of those decks that holds its own in its current metagame. The players that play it see a lot of success with it, and it's an incredibly powerful deck when piloted correctly. So I see players like Alo Blitzel chain win after win after win after win online with the deck, and I think Pidgeot Control just seems like it's an absolute fantastic choice if you know what you're doing with it. I don't particularly know every single line of play with it. That's the reason why I'm not out there cashing back-to-back top 8s. Would be a deck that I wouldn't mind learning in the future. We're going to see Raging Bolts. Raging Bolt's a deck that I'm going to put in the 1.5 category. I think it's definitely has its drawbacks for some matchups like Gardevoir, Ancient Box, Pidgeot Control, etc. But it does have its opportunities to see success, so I think it's going to be in that 1.5 tier. Probably going to see some more aggressive decks in that general area. Having a matchup, having some strength against Regidrago certainly can help when it comes down to it. And speaking about Regidrago is going to be in our top of the list. I think Regidrago is just absolutely fantastic. And I think Gardevoir, Charizard, Regidrago really balance out the top three. Those are the decks that I think that you can almost always play at the regionals. It's never going to be a wrong choice if you choose between those three. Lugia is close to being there, but it's really fallen off a little bit recently, which is why I'm going to put it at tier 1. But Regidrago is just won Toronto Regionals, our last major event that we've had before Birmingham and Rio de Janeiro. So we're going to see if it's going to continue on at those. I know this is a Birmingham tier list, but I will be looking at the results of Rio de Janeiro to update everyone on how the metagame shifted. Roaring Moon, Turbo Roaring Moon. I think that this deck is... I want to put it at 2. As much as I said that some of the other aggressive decks might see success, it's one of those things... actually, I'm going to put it at 1.5. I think it's there enough at 1.5, where Turbo Roaring Moon, a deck that, like... 1.5 is more like, I think that you could, like, top 32, top 64 the regionals with these kind of decks. Not relatively easily, but, like, with a decent run, you can get there. With a decent player, you can get there. Anything above that would probably be tier 1, and then tier S is like really where it's going to be winning the regionals. I think Turbo Roaring Moon, like I usually put it below the other aggressive decks, which is why I was thinking about putting it tier 2, because it sometimes has to damage itself. Sometimes the other decks are just a little bit better, but it's probably all relatively the same because it has a better control matchup than the other ones. Speaking about control, we have Snorlax. I'm going to put Snorlax in the 1.5 territory as well. So 1.5 is really where we're going to see a lot of those decks that just like aren't in the top 5, give or take. And I think it's a good deck to make day 2 at a regionals with. I think certainly there's some flaws when it comes to your matchups. You can just run into some things or have a rough go if you're playing the boxed order build. But if you play the deck right, if you're able to keep your pace of play at a proper measure and like make sure your opponent is as well, Snorlax is the type of deck like Pidgeot Control that can usually go pretty deep when it comes to these events. Tropico with Dusknoir. It's really a deck that I think has fallen off a little bit. I'm probably going to put this deck at tier 2.5. It's just not there. And I think I'm going to move Dragapult Thorns up, by the way, to 1.5 more and more that I think about it. I think a lot of decks are kind of in this 1.5 tier, and maybe I can shift everything down a little bit, but like I think it's probably fine when we go with based off of my metric, like top 64, top 32 in your regionals. These are really good decks when it comes to making day 2 there, but not overly too much more. Cloth, I think Cloth is going to be again another one of these decks where you can make day 2 with the deck. I don't think it goes too much further than that right now, and maybe it will in the future, but based off the decks that are up there, like you can hold your own against some of them, but it's not always going to be perfect. Last deck that we're going to go over is more Miraidon, and Miraidon again, probably going to be going into the 1.5 territory when it comes down to it. Don't really see too much else that I'd want to add in here. We're probably going to have our only tier 3 deck right now, and that's going to be the Wallstall, Mimikyu, Cornerstone, Ogerpon, or maybe the Noivern build. And I think it's just like a little bit like outdated for our format, so I think that's where a lot of the tier 3 decks kind of fall. It didn't see as much success as like Dragapult Dusknoir, or Lost Zone, Palkia Dusknoir, or Tropico's Dusknoir. Wallstall is just kind of going to be chilling there. One that everyone probably wants to see is our Chaladon, but I'm going to go with the Ceruledge next. Ceruledge right now is probably just... You want to know what? I'm going to probably put it at tier 3 as well. To sit beside Wallstall. It's just not super well positioned in our current format. It doesn't hold its own against a lot of decks like Charizard and Regidrago, where it might hold its own in its Prismatic Evolution format. It just doesn't necessarily get the job done here. But our Chaladon is going to be the big newcomer deck, and I think I'm going to put it at, you guessed it, 1.5. It's seen a lot of success. It can hold its own against a lot of decks on this list, and I think it's deserving of being at 1.5 right now. I think this is a pretty like decent list when it comes down to it. Like 1.5 are really like the bulk of the decks that are just like generally good. Anything above that is going to be just slightly better, or slightly, or below it slightly worse. 2.5 is really where I think the line gets drawn between like these decks aren't really played as much as the 1.5s, but can still maybe hold their own at a cup challenge. Maybe can make a day 2. And tier 3 is really like, hey, we're kind of out of the meta game. We're really on that outer core. Really should have a reason on how the meta game shifts. And of course, the S tier decks at the top are just going to be the general best decks in format. I hope that this list has been pretty informative of how I think the metagame shifts around. And again, I do want to know if there's any decks that you think that I missed on this list. I forgot to upload 3 things, the Wall Salvus, Through Legend, Archalodon. I was like, hey, where are those decks? Because I thought I made a few more icons, and I was right. So I found them. That's why I kind of slightly edited in between part 1 and part 2 of this video, in the same video, of course. Appreciate everyone tuning in so far. Love the content going on the channel this week. Like, there's a lot of really great stuff that I'm excited to showcase with all y'all. So stay tuned for all of that, and more. If you're trying to improve your game before Birmingham, Rio, San Antonio, London, any upcoming events, hit me up for some coaching at metafy.gg/@Zach probably going to be running another group class before EUIC, so stay tuned for that. Other than that, a lot of great content coming on, so just keep on watching the channel, keep on providing those likes, those comments, all of that would be fantastic. I'll catch up with all y'all later. Peace out and have a great one.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.